podcast was created as a supplemental learning resource for our cognitive psychology course. The content is based on course topics and readings from Essentials of Cognitive Psychology by Christopher Klein, along with instructor-developed explanations, examples, and pedagogical framing. AI tools were used to help transform course material into a conversational podcast format, including the use of AI-generated voices. The use of AI voice technology is intended to make the material more engaging, accessible, and flexible for students. However, the podcast should not replace careful reading of the textbook, reviewing course materials, or completing assigned activities. Any interpretations, examples, or explanations included in the podcast are provided for educational purposes and are the responsibility of the instructor. Students should rely on the assigned textbook, course lectures, and official course materials as the primary sources for exams, assignments, and class discussions.
Imagine you are standing in a crowded, intensely noisy room, like a classic cocktail party.
Right. There's upbeat music blaring from speakers in the corners.
Exactly. And at least 24 people are laughing and talking simultaneously, and glasses are constantly clinking.
It's just sheer acoustic chaos.
Yeah, total chaos. Yet somehow, amidst all of that, you are able to perfectly track the one single conversation you're having with the person standing directly in front of you.
You're completely locked in on their words.
Right. But then, out of nowhere, you suddenly hear your own name spoken by someone completely on the other side of the room. Your head snaps over.
It's wild.
It is. How does the brain actually do that? Like, how do we flawlessly filter out the overwhelming noise, but still manage to catch the exact sound of our own name?
Okay, so let's unpack this.
It is the ultimate cognitive paradox, honestly. That scenario, which is famously known as the cocktail party effect, is the absolute bedrock of how researchers understand human attention. And since we are taking a deep dive specifically into Chapter 3 of the textbook Essentials of Cognitive Psychology, to help you lock in the material for your upcoming cognitive psych course, this is really the perfect starting point.
It really is. The text defines attention as a mechanism with a fundamental dual nature. On one hand, it's controlled voluntarily. You consciously direct your awareness to the person in front of you.
Right, but on the other hand, it can be involuntarily hijacked by external events in the environment.
Exactly.
Because I certainly didn't consciously decide to stop listening to the person in front of me and scan the room for my name.
No, you didn't.
The environment grabbed my attention by force and just pulled it away from my voluntary focus.
Which brings us to the core premise of the entire field of attention research, which is the concept of a strictly limited capacity for information processing.
Right, limited capacity.
Yeah. We physically and neurologically cannot process everything that is happening around us at once. I mean, our cognitive resources are finite.
Let's actually visualize that limitation for a second, for you listening. If you're at that cocktail party, you aren't just ignoring other voices.
Oh, definitely not. There are dazzling bright colors from the overhead lighting.
Right, and there are the distinct smells of the nearby floral arrangements on the tables or, the heavy perfume of the person who just walked past you.
And physically, you might be wearing a pair of dress shoes that are pinching your toes.
Yeah, the worst. Or like a watch with a metal band that's slightly too tight on your wrist.
But when you are deeply engaged in that one conversation about some intense office drama, you simply do not feel the tight shoes.
You don't smell the flowers either.
Exactly. Your brain is actively suppressing an absolute mountain of raw sensory data so you can actually process the meaning of the words your friend is saying.
Think about the sheer volume of sensory input bombarding your central nervous system every single second.
It's massive. We are talking about millions of bits of data flowing from your retinas, your auditory nerve, the mechanoreceptors in your skin.
Yeah, and if the human brain didn't possess a bottleneck, like a specialized mechanism to restrict what actually makes it through to conscious awareness, we would just be completely paralyzed by sensory overload.
You wouldn't be able to form a single coherent thought, let alone carry on a nuanced conversation.
So the bottleneck isn't some sort of design flaw or, a limitation to be overcome.
Not at all. It's a vital evolutionary feature that filters absolute chaos into a manageable stream of reality.
Okay, so attention operates essentially like a literal spotlight in a massive pitch black warehouse of sensory information.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, you only have this one single beam of light. You point it at the conversation right in front of you, illuminating it, while everything else, the tight shoes, the perfume, the other voices, stays completely in the dark.
Right.
But if a glass shatters in the corner or someone drops your name, that spotlight violently swings over to illuminate the new stimulus.
The spotlight metaphor works exceptionally well because it captures the spatial, focused nature of voluntary attention. But we have to take it a step further.
Okay, how so?
Well, the crucial question cognitive psychologists started asking in the mid-20th century was, how exactly does the brain's internal wiring decide what gets illuminated and what stays in the dark?
Because the dark stuff hasn't disappeared.
Exactly. The sound waves of the other conversations are still physically hitting your eardrums. The light waves are still hitting your retinas. So where exactly does the information get stopped?
Right, because if the spotlight swings to my name, the brain must be monitoring the dark areas to some degree.
Yes.
Which dives right into the historical debate over selection models. We need to look at the exact flowchart of how information moves from the outside world into our conscious minds.
Okay, so the first major theoretical framework the text covers is Donald Broadbent's filter theory, which was proposed back in 1958.
Oh, right, Broadbent.
Yeah, and Broadbent championed what we call an early selection model.
Yeah.
To really grasp this for the exam, you have to understand the specific methodology researchers used at the time.
They used a procedure called the dichotic listening task, right?
They did.
Let's put you, the listener, in that 1950s laboratory for a minute. You're sitting in a chair wearing a pair of clunky, heavy headphones.
Very clunky. And the researchers are playing a completely different audio stream into each ear simultaneously.
So, into your left ear, they might play a dramatic narrative about a bank robbery.
And into your right ear, they play a dry, continuous list of random words.
And the researcher gives you a specific instruction. They say you must pay attention only to the story in the left ear and completely ignore the right ear.
But to ensure you are actually paying attention, they require you to perform a shadowing task.
Shadowing, meaning I have to repeat the bank robbery story out loud, word for word, as I'm hearing it.
Right, and shadowing is incredibly cognitively demanding. I mean, it forces your spotlight to remain locked entirely on the left ear.
So after a few minutes of this, the researchers stop the tape and ask you, what did you hear in the right ear?
And what Broadbent found was staggering. Participants basically heard nothing. They couldn't recall a single word from the unattended list.
Wow, not even one word.
Barely any. In some variations of the experiment, researchers even changed the language in the unattended ear from English to German.
Wait, really?
Yeah, or they played the tape backwards, and the participants didn't even notice.
That is wild. If I don't even notice the language changing from English to German, my brain is doing zero processing of that information. It's just a wall of noise.
Exactly. And that data led directly to Broadbent's flowchart.
Yeah.
He argued that all sensory information enters a preliminary sensory buffer,
Okay, a buffer?
but almost immediately it hits a strict filter. This filter selects what to let through based entirely on basic physical sensory characteristics.
So it's filtering based on the physical location of the sound, like left ear versus right ear.
Yeah.
Or maybe the pitch of the voice, like a male baritone versus a high-pitched female voice.
Precisely. The filter identifies the physical channel you want to attend to, and it completely blocks everything else.
So in Broadbent's model, the ignored information is entirely discarded before it ever reaches the stage of perceptual processing or meaning analysis.
Yes. It never enters short-term memory. It never becomes conscious.
So Broadbent is essentially arguing that the brain's filter is a ruthless, superficial nightclub bouncer.
Oh, I love that. A bouncer.
Yeah, like he doesn't care who you are, he doesn't ask your name, he doesn't care about your personality or what you mean, he just looks at your physical ID.
Like, are you coming from the left ear?
Right. Are you a high-pitched voice? And if you don't match the physical description on the VIP list, he completely bars you from entry. You are stuck out on the street.
That captures the strict nature of the early filter perfectly. But, as with any major scientific theory, other researchers immediately started trying to break it.
Of course they did.
And it didn't take long to find a massive, fatal flaw.
Uh-oh.
In 1959, Neville Moray conducted a variation of the dichotic listening task. He had participants shadowing a message in one ear.
Okay.
But in the unattended ear, the ear that Broadbent claimed was completely blocked by the bouncer, Moray inserted a very specific phrase, the participant's own name.
Oh, and let me guess. The cocktail party effect held up in the lab. They heard their names.
About a third of the time, yes.
Huh.
The participants immediately noticed their name, and their shadowing task was disrupted.
Wow. Okay, so this completely broke Broadbent's model.
It really did. Because if the bouncer is strictly blocking everything based on physical traits before any meaning is analyzed, how could the brain possibly know that the random acoustic sound waves hitting the unattended ear formed the meaning of the participant's name?
Exactly. Because if the filter is just looking at physical sound wave frequencies, the sound of my name has the exact same physical traits as any other word spoken by that same voice.
Exactly.
The only thing that makes my name special is its meaning. So the brain must be secretly analyzing the meaning of the people out on the street outside the club.
Yeah.
The bouncer model is broken.
It's totally broken. And this is where Anne Treisman enters the picture in 1960. Treisman needed to solve this logical paradox.
So what does she do?
Well, she agreed with Broadbent that selection happens early, and that it relies heavily on physical characteristics to separate the streams of information.
But she changed something.
She fundamentally changed the mechanism of the filter. Instead of a strict all-or-nothing bouncer, Treisman proposed an attenuation model.
An attenuation model.
Right. The filter doesn't completely block unattended information. It just attenuates it.
So Treisman isn't replacing the bouncer, she's just giving him a volume knob.
That's a great way to put it.
He's not physically throwing people out of the club, he's just muting their microphones. The information from the unattended ear is still playing in the background, but the volume is turned down so low you don't consciously register it.
And because that attenuated low-volume information is still technically leaking through the system, it eventually reaches the brain's dictionary unit, which is where meaning is analyzed.
A dictionary unit.
Yeah. And here is the true genius of Treisman's theory. She proposed that every word in your mental vocabulary has a specific activation threshold.
An activation threshold, meaning how loud or strong a signal needs to be for my brain to consciously recognize it.
Right. Most random words like table or bicycle have a high threshold.
Okay.
So if the signal's attenuated and weak, it won't cross the threshold and you won't consciously hear it.
But certain highly pertinent words have a permanently low threshold.
Yes, exactly. Your own name, the names of your family members, maybe a word associated with danger, like fire.
Because my name has such a low threshold, even a tiny, weak, attenuated trickle of a signal coming from the ignored ear is enough to trip the wire and activate the concept in my conscious mind.
Exactly.
The sheer meaning of the word overcomes the low volume.
That's the exact mechanism. Treisman proved this with another brilliant shadowing experiment.
Oh, what did she do this time?
She had participants shadowing the right ear. The right ear heard, "I saw the girl jumping in the street."
Okay, weird sentence, but sure.
And the left ear heard, "Me and my dog walking in the park."
Got it.
But right in the middle, she switched the streams. So the right ear heard, "I saw the girl walking in the park," and the left ear heard, "Me and my dog jumping in the street."
Oh, that's clever. She split the logical sentence across the 2 ears.
And what happened? The participants frequently accidentally switched the ear they were shadowing.
No way.
Yeah, they would say out loud, "I saw the girl walking in the park," momentarily shadowing the wrong ear, just to follow the meaning of the sentence.
Oh, wow.
This provided undeniable proof that the brain is tracking meaning across all sensory inputs, at least on a rudimentary level, even when we're trying to ignore them.
But wait, if my brain is capable of turning up the volume to follow a sentence across ears or catching my name, it means my brain had to know what was being spoken in the first place.
Right.
Doesn't that imply I am secretly translating every single word in the room just in case it's important? That sounds like a terrifying cognitive load.
You've just articulated the exact argument of the next wave of theorists. Yeah, researchers like Deutsch in 1963 looked at Treisman's data and said, why overcomplicate this with volume knobs and dictionary units? If meaning can get through, then maybe all meaning gets through.
So they threw out the early filter altogether.
They did. They proposed late selection models.
Late selection. So moving the filter to the very end of the assembly line.
Exactly. In a late selection model, all incoming sensory data, the left ear, the right ear, the tight shoes, the smell of flowers, makes it past the sensory registers and goes straight into semantic analysis.
Oh.
Your brain subconsciously processes the meaning of every single conversation at the cocktail party. It is eavesdropping on the entire room.
That is insane.
Only after the meaning is fully analyzed does a late filter step in and decide, okay, this conversation is boring, throw it out. This conversation is interesting, let it into short-term memory and conscious awareness.
See, I have to push back on that because it totally violates the very first premise of the chapter.
How so?
We established that human processing capacity is strictly limited. If my brain is simultaneously processing the semantic meaning of 30 different conversations, translating German to English, and monitoring my tight shoes,
Right.
that requires an unbelievable amount of computational horsepower. That is the exact opposite of a bottleneck. It sounds exhausting and, frankly, biologically impossible for an organism trying to conserve glucose.
Your skepticism is entirely justified, and it mirrors the exact fierce debate that dominated cognitive psychology through the 1960s and 70s.
So they were fighting about this.
The field was completely deadlocked. Proponents of early selection had mountains of data showing people couldn't notice a language change in an unattended ear, which proved the filter acts early to save energy.
Okay, but what about the late selection side?
Well, proponents of late selection had mountains of data showing people's behavior could be subtly influenced by the meaning of words they claimed they didn't hear.
So how does a field resolve a deadlock where two opposing theories both have undeniable empirical data backing them up? Usually it means the truth is some messy, dynamic hybrid of the two.
And that brings us to arguably the most elegant solution in the chapter: the multimode model of attention, developed by Johnston and Hines in 1978.
The multimode model.
Yeah, they proposed a radical idea. The location of the filter is not hardwired.
Okay.
It is not permanently fixed early and is not permanently fixed late. The brain is flexible.
Oh, that makes sense.
Selection is a dynamic process that changes depending on the demands of the specific task and how much mental effort the person is willing to expend.
Wait, the filter can move based on what I'm doing? How did they possibly prove that in a lab?
They used a brilliant dual-task paradigm. They had participants perform a dichotic listening task, shadowing one ear and ignoring the other.
Same as before.
But they added a second simultaneous task. A light bulb was placed in front of the participant. Whenever the light flashed, the participant had to push a button as fast as possible. This measured their reaction time.
Oh, I see where this is going. Reaction time is a proxy for how much brain power is being consumed by the listening task.
Exactly.
If my brain is working incredibly hard to filter the audio, I'm going to be slower to push the button when the light flashes.
Precisely. In one condition, participants had to filter the audio based on a physical trait, like a male voice versus a female voice.
So that's early selection.
Right, early selection.
Yeah.
In another condition, both voices were male, so the participant had to filter based on meaning, like a list of cities versus a list of occupations.
Which forces late selection.
Exactly.
And the reaction times to the light flash.
When participants used early selection, filtering by physical traits, their reaction times to the light were fast.
Okay.
But when they were forced to use late selection, filtering by meaning, their reaction times to the light significantly slowed down.
Wow.
This proved that late selection consumes far more of our limited cognitive capacity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Our brain is essentially shifting gears between an automatic and a manual transmission.
I love that comparison.
Yeah, like we naturally default to the automatic transmission, that early Broadbent style physical filtering, because it's cheap, it saves mental energy. We don't want to overwork the engine.
Right.
But when the situation demands it, when we are in a complex environment where we can't separate things by physical traits, we force the brain into manual transmission.
We shift gears.
We use late selection, analyzing meaning in the background, even though it burns way more mental gas and slows down our reaction times to other things.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights that cognitive flexibility is the greatest evolutionary advantage of the human brain.
Absolutely.
We are not rigid machines. We deploy our finite mental resources dynamically, constantly weighing the cost of processing against the potential benefit of the information.
But, establishing that the brain has this incredible flexibility and that it can, under certain manual transmission conditions, process complex meaning completely outside of our conscious awareness,
Wow.
well, that opens up a very dark door.
Oh, it does.
If my brain is analyzing meaning in the shadows, what happens when information intentionally tries to bypass my conscious filters?
A very good question.
Can I be manipulated by things I don't even know I'm perceiving? This transitions us into the highly controversial, slightly creepy realm of subliminal perception.
It is a topic that endlessly fascinates the public, and it flows perfectly from the concept of late selection.
For sure.
Subliminal perception, by definition, is the idea that stimuli presented below the absolute threshold for conscious awareness can still be processed for meaning and subsequently influence our thoughts, feelings, or actions.
See, whenever you say subliminal, my mind immediately goes to Cold War era mind control, hidden messages in advertisements, and specifically the legendary 1950s popcorn myth.
Oh, the popcorn myth, classic.
Let me paint the picture of this story for you, the listener, because this is wild. In 1957, a market researcher named James Vickery held a press conference.
Right.
He claimed he had conducted a massive secret experiment over 6 weeks in a movie theater in New Jersey playing the film Picnic. He used a special machine called a tachistoscope to flash 2 messages onto the screen during the movie. Drink Coca-Cola and hungry, eat popcorn.
And he claimed he flashed them for a mere 13,000th of a second. So incredibly fast that the human eye could not consciously register them.
Completely subliminal. The audience had zero awareness they were being advertised to.
Not at all.
But Vickery claimed the subconscious brain processed the commands, and the results were a 57% increase in popcorn sales and an 18% increase in Coca-Cola sales at the concession stand.
And people lost their minds.
The public reaction was sheer panic. People believed corporations now possess literal mind control. Books were written about hitting persuaders.
The CIA started investigating.
Yes. The Federal Communications Commission threatened to revoke the broadcast license of any TV station that used subliminal messaging.
The societal impact was massive. It permanently embedded the fear of subliminal manipulation into the cultural zeitgeist.
And then, the ultimate plot twist.
Here it comes.
A few years later, under intense pressure from scientists who couldn't replicate his results, Vickery admitted the truth.
Yeah.
He completely fabricated the entire study. He didn't have the data. He just made the whole thing up to drum up publicity for his failing marketing firm.
Unbelievable.
The most famous, terrifying example of subliminal messaging in human history was a total, absolute hoax.
It was a scam. But, the Vickery hoax created a fascinating scientific ripple effect.
How so?
Even though he lied, the concept he proposed was theoretically plausible under the late selection models we just discussed.
Oh, right. Because meaning gets through.
Exactly. If the brain analyzes meaning before conscious awareness, could a rapidly flashed word prime a behavior? It sparked decades of highly rigorous, controlled laboratory research to see if the underlying concept was actually real.
And what did the actual rigorous science find? Because the textbook specifically highlights the work of researchers Cheesman and Miracle in the mid-1980s.
Yes, their work is crucial here.
How do you even study something that someone claims they can't see?
That was exactly the methodological nightmare that Cheesman and Miracle tackled in 1984 and 1986. They recognized that the core issue in all subliminal research was defining the threshold of consciousness.
Okay, the threshold.
Right. If you flash a word on a screen for 50 milliseconds and ask the participant, "Did you see a word?" and they say no, how do you know for a scientific fact that they didn't see it?
Right, because human beings are unreliable narrators of their own internal experience. Maybe they saw a blur but didn't want to sound stupid by guessing, so they just said no.
Exactly. So Cheesman and Miracle introduced a vital distinction between an objective threshold and a subjective threshold.
Okay, let's break those down.
The objective threshold is a hard physical limit. It is the point at which the visual stimulus is presented so briefly or at such a low contrast that your sensory organs physically cannot detect it at a rate better than random chance.
So it's totally invisible.
Right. If I flash a word for 5 milliseconds and they give you a forced choice test, like was it apple or house, and your accuracy is exactly 50%, you are at the objective threshold. The information simply did not enter your nervous system.
It's like playing a dog whistle. My ears physically lack the receptors to hear that frequency. If the information is below the objective threshold, it doesn't matter what late selection models say, the data isn't in the machine. No influence is possible.
Precisely. But the subjective threshold is where the magic happens.
Okay, tell me about the subjective threshold.
This is the level at which the stimulus is physically strong enough to enter your nervous system. If I force you to guess apple or house, you might actually guess correctly 60% or 70% of the time.
Or if my brain is detecting it.
Your brain is detecting it. But, and this is the key, the stimulus is still so brief that you, the conscious subject, feel like you didn't see anything.
Wow.
You lack the subjective experience of awareness. You
Yeah.
feel like you're just blindly guessing.
This raises an important question. If someone feels like they are blindly guessing, but they are statistically guessing right 70% of the time, their subconscious brain clearly possesses the information.
It does.
So, did Cheesman and Miracle prove that information sitting between the objective and subjective thresholds can actually influence our behavior?
They did, using a phenomenon called semantic priming.
Okay, how did that work?
In their setup, they would present a prime word, let's say the word doctor, flashed so quickly it was below the subjective threshold.
So the participant swears they saw nothing.
Right. Immediately after, a target word appears on the screen clearly, like the word nursey. The participant's job is simply to read the target word out loud as fast as possible.
Okay, so tracking reaction times again.
Exactly. What they consistently found was that participants read the word nurse significantly faster if they had been subliminally primed with the related word doctor, compared to if they'd been primed with an unrelated word like table. The subliminal prime activated the semantic network associated with medicine in the brain, making it easier and faster to process related concepts, even though the participant had absolutely no conscious awareness of seeing the prime word.
So Vickery was a fraud, but the science says subliminal perception is fundamentally real.
Yes.
My brain can read a word I don't know I saw, and it changes how fast I react to the next thing I see. That sounds like a slippery slope right back to mind control.
It's crucial to contextualize these findings because the text makes it very clear. While subliminal perception is a real, measurable phenomenon in the heavily controlled environment of a laboratory, the effects are extraordinarily fragile.
Fragile. Okay.
Yeah, they are very small in magnitude, and they only last for a fraction of a second.
So it's not going to make me suddenly get off the couch, drive to the store, and buy a 12-pack of Coca-Cola.
Not at all. If you flash the word thirsty on a screen for 20 milliseconds, you cannot magically override someone's conscious will.
Well, that's a relief.
At most, if they're already physically thirsty and you immediately offer them a choice between a sports drink and a soda, the subliminal prime might tip the statistical scale slightly toward a beverage they already somewhat preferred.
So just a tiny nudge?
Just a nudge.
Yeah.
You cannot implant complex commands or drastically alter someone's fundamental values.
Yeah.
The gap between a 20-millisecond reaction time boost in a lab and real-world behavioral manipulation is an ocean.
That is definitely a relief. Our brains might register a fleeting whisper in the dark, but it's not going to hijack the steering wheel.
Exactly.
But, speaking of hijacking the steering wheel, trying to actively manage what we are consciously focusing on versus what is happening in the background brings us directly to the ultimate everyday attention trap.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about the grand modern illusion of multitasking.
This is undoubtedly the most practically relevant section of the chapter for anyone listening.
100%.
We exist in a hyper-connected society that not only encourages divided attention, it practically demands it. People view multitasking as a badge of honor.
Oh, absolutely. We proudly list it as a skill in our resumes. We genuinely believe we are effectively studying this textbook while a Netflix show plays on the TV, while simultaneously carrying on a text conversation in a group chat.
And we feel incredibly productive.
We do. But cognitive psychology confronts us with a very harsh, scientifically validated reality.
And that reality is anchored directly in the fundamental premise we established in Monet 1. Attention is a finite, limited capacity resource.
Yeah.
Therefore, the cognitive truth is that human beings cannot perform multiple cognitively demanding tasks simultaneously. It is neurologically impossible.
So what exactly is my brain doing when I'm studying a textbook and watching a TV show? If I'm not doing them at the same time, what's happening?
Your brain is engaging in rapid task switching.
Rapid task switching.
Yeah. You are reading a sentence, then disengaging your attention from the book, moving it to the TV to catch a line of dialogue, processing that, disengaging again, and moving back to the book.
So just bouncing back and forth.
Exactly. You are sequentially shining that single spotlight back and forth. And every single time you switch, there is a measurable cognitive cost.
The task switching cost.
Yes. The executive control network in your frontal lobes has to drop the rules and context of one task and load up the rules and context of the new task.
And that takes time.
It takes milliseconds,
Yeah.
but those milliseconds compound. The research overwhelmingly shows that when you task switch, you lose time, your error rate skyrockets, and your deep comprehension of both tasks drops significantly compared to if you had just completed them linearly, one after the other.
So studying while watching TV just guarantees I'll get a worse grade on the exam and I won't even remember the plot of the show.
Pretty much.
That's inefficient, but, it's not life-threatening. The text, however, uses a much more severe example to illustrate the limits of divided attention. Driving while talking on a cell phone.
Driving is an incredibly complex, dynamic task requiring constant visual and spatial monitoring. Having a conversation is a highly demanding semantic and social task. When you try to do both, you massively exceed your limited capacity bottleneck.
Now, the common defense is, but I use a hands-free device. My hands are on the wheel and my eyes are looking straight through the windshield.
Right. The law usually only bans holding the phone. But cognitive psychology tells us that attention is not just about the physical orientation of your eyeballs.
It's about the brain,
It's about where your mental processing power is actively allocated.
which introduces one of the most terrifying phenomena in cognitive science: inattentional blindness.
It really is terrifying.
This occurs when an object is fully visible, your eyes are perfectly focused on it, light from the object is hitting your retinas, but you completely fail to consciously perceive it because your limited cognitive resources are entirely consumed by a different task.
Let's ground this in the famous invisible gorilla experiment by Simons and Chabris, because it illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, I love this one.
They showed participants a video of people passing a basketball and gave them a highly demanding task. Count the exact number of passes made by the team in white shirts.
And the task is difficult enough that it requires your full attentional spotlight.
It does. And right in the middle of the video, a person in a full gorilla suit walks directly into the center of the frame, thumps their chest, and walks off.
Just a person in a gorilla suit.
Yeah, and they are on screen for 9 seconds.
And when you ask the participants afterward, did you see the gorilla? Roughly 50% of them say, what gorilla?
50%.
They completely miss a giant primate walking through the middle of their field of vision because their processing capacity was maxed out on counting basketballs.
Now, take that mechanism and apply it to driving a 2-ton vehicle at 60 miles an hour.
Oh, man.
Researchers like David Strayer have put participants in driving simulators while having them engage in hands-free cell phone conversations. They tracked their eye movements and monitored their brainwaves using EEG.
And what did they find?
What they found was horrifying. The driver's eyes would look directly at the brake lights of the car stopping in front of them. The visual information entered the eye.
Okay.
But the P300 brainwave, which is the neural signature of conscious attention, was significantly diminished.
Because the attention spotlight was entirely focused on formulating their next sentence in the phone argument.
Exactly. They were cognitively blind to the brake lights, even though their eyes were pointed right at them.
That is so dangerous.
Their reaction times plummeted to the level of someone who is legally intoxicated. That is the true danger of divided attention. It's not that your hands aren't on the wheel, it's that your mind is not on the road.
That is an incredibly sobering reality check. But what about skills that we have practiced so much they become second nature?
Automated skills.
Right. I don't have to use my conscious spotlight to think about the physical mechanics of walking or tying my shoes or even driving the exact same route to work I've driven 1,000 times. Don't highly practiced automated skills bypass the bottleneck and free up our attention?
That is a critical nuance in the architecture of attention. Yes, with extensive, consistent practice, complex tasks can transition from declarative, step-by-step conscious processes into procedural, automated motor programs.
So they run on autopilot.
Automated skills require very little to no conscious attention. They run in the background.
So if a skill is fully automated, like an expert piano player playing a familiar scale, is it perfectly safe to multitask while doing it?
To a degree, yes, you can hold a conversation while walking. But here is the fascinating paradox of automation, which the text highlights through the research of C.N. Beilock and Thomas Carr in 2001.
The paradox of automation.
They studied a phenomenon known as choking under pressure. They brought experienced expert golfers into the lab and had them perform a series of putts.
And an expert's golf swing is the ultimate automated motor program. It is fluid, deeply ingrained muscle memory.
Exactly. In one condition, they had the expert golfers perform a dual task: put the ball while simultaneously listening to a tape and identifying specific tones.
So this divided their attention.
It did. And the experts actually performed quite well because their automated putting program ran perfectly in the background while their conscious attention was distracted by the tones.
Okay, but what happens if you force the expert to use their conscious attention on the putt?
That was the second condition. They told the experts, "We want you to pay close attention to the exact physical mechanics of your swing. Focus on the angle of your club head and the follow-through of your arms." When the experts took their high-powered conscious attention and forced it back onto a skill that was already automated, their performance completely fell apart. They choked.
Because they are taking a smooth, integrated procedural memory and trying to aggressively micromanage it with clunky step-by-step declarative processing.
Exactly.
Oh, that is universally relatable. It's like when you are just sitting there totally relaxed reading a book and suddenly you realize you are breathing.
Yep, the breathing thing.
And the exact moment you consciously notice it, the automated rhythm stops and you have to manually breathe in, out, in.
It's the worst.
And it feels totally unnatural and weird, and you feel like you've completely forgotten how to do something your body has successfully done on its own for decades.
That is a brilliant physiological parallel. The Bylock and Carr study beautifully synthesizes the complexity of the attention system. We fail when we try to split our attention between two demanding conscious tasks, leading to inattentional blindness.
Right.
But we also fail if we take our conscious spotlight and point it directly at an automated process that is designed to run in the dark. We actively disrupt the background program.
All right. This has been an incredibly dense, layered, and fascinating journey through the invisible machinery of our own minds. Let's bring all these concepts together for you, the listener, so your conceptual framework is completely locked in for your cognitive psych exam.
Good idea.
We started with the foundational, non-negotiable principle. Your attention is a finite, limited mental resource. It acts as a bottleneck, a necessary evolutionary adaptation designed to protect your higher reasoning centers from being overwhelmed by the sheer, chaotic volume of sensory data in the environment.
We then explored the decades-long debate over how that bottleneck selects information.
The bouncer versus the volume knob.
Right. We looked at early selection models, like Broadbent's bouncer, which filter out data based purely on physical traits to conserve cognitive energy.
But we saw how phenomena like hearing your name across a crowded room necessitated Treisman's attenuation theory.
And eventually, lake selection models, proving that our brains are constantly monitoring the meaning of our surroundings in the background.
And we resolved that debate with the multimode model, recognizing that the human brain is beautifully flexible, shifting gears between cheap early selection and expensive late selection depending on the complexity of the task.
We also navigated the murky, fascinating waters of subliminal perception.
Right, learning that while the Hollywood myths of mind control are total hoaxes, our brains can indeed be subtly, momentarily primed by semantic meaning we don't consciously register.
And finally, we utterly shattered the dangerous myth of multitasking. We learned that task switching is inherently inefficient, that attempting to divide our attention during complex tasks like driving leads to literal cognitive blindness, and that forcing conscious focus onto deeply automated skills can cause the system to crash and choke.
Consider this deep dive not just the ultimate study session to ace your Chapter 3 exam, but also a very scientifically backed, data-driven intervention reminding you to never, ever text and drive.
Please don't.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you with a final lingering thought, a provocation that builds on the fundamental biological truths we discussed today.
Something to really think about.
We have established unequivocally that our cognitive architecture features a strict, limited capacity bottleneck. This is a biological system forged over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, optimized to handle the speed, density, and nature of the natural world.
A world of predators, changing weather, and face-to-face linear conversations.
Right. A world that operated at a radically different, much slower pace of information delivery.
So what does that mean for us today?
Exactly. So what does that biological reality mean for our brains right now? We are currently living in an unprecedented era where the sheer volume of digital information, the constant pinging of push notifications, the infinite algorithmic scroll of social media, and the demand for constant connectivity is doubling every few years.
It's a completely novel environment for our brains.
We are actively bombarding our ancient, limited capacity bottleneck with a relentless volume of data was never evolutionarily designed to handle.
Are we forcing our biological attention systems to rapidly adapt, perhaps fragmenting our ability to sustain deep focus entirely?
Or are we fundamentally, permanently hardware limited in a completely software-driven world?
It's a profound, arguably existential question about the friction between our static biology and our exponentially accelerating technology.
Something to ponder the next time you find yourself standing in a noisy room trying to track a conversation and waiting to see if you hear your name. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Good luck on the exam.
When you